Welcome to As Built, the podcast about architecture firms and buildings and how both get built. I am your host, Brian Jones. My guest today is Malcolm Reading, chairman of Malcolm Reading Consultants. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Brian.
To start off, you practiced architecture before founding your consultancy. Why did you decide to transition from a traditional architectural practice into a strategic firm of your own making?
Easy question. Necessity is the mother of invention. I just couldn't find a match in architecture after I'd studied. I wasn't a designer, I wasn't a deliverer. And I think like many entrepreneurs, I was frustrated that I couldn't find the right role in a traditional firm. So after training, I did a bit of architecture, but I took a job in a client organization, which was a design-aware NGO. And my role really was to commission architects across the world for fairly modest buildings, but ones that had a high level of identity and communication. And I got a feel there for the value of collaborations, international visiting architects with local skills. I liked that. It was a sort of very positive experience. And so coming out of this was a realization the clients also needed to express themselves clearly before a project starts. And also they need to develop an awareness that not all architects are the same. There are different strengths and skills in small and large firms. So putting all this together convinced me there was a gap I could fill, helping clients define their need and then finding the right professional team to implement it. And that was really I'm not sure we got there by planning. It was mostly being pragmatic. But I did identify this gap, which I thought existed, and I still feel strongly it does, of a bridge between the professionals and the client organizations. And we built a team in London. We're based in London, a mix of architects, writers, procurement specialists, and graphic designers. So it's a sort of creative firm.
So as you explain on your website, your firm is unique in that it plays a role of architect and of the client. You trained as an architect. How did you develop the ability to inhabit the client mindset, and how do you impart that to new staff as they join?
Yeah, well, I think this is something that evolved. I couldn't claim there was a light bulb moment when I was on the journey, but I did realize perhaps working for a client organization early on, it gave me a perspective, which I didn't get through architectural school. As a client, you worry about so many things, not just how things will look, but the budget, whether your stakeholders are going to support you, whether your project will be prioritized. I'm sure it's a very common feeling in many clients. But I think it makes you look at design differently as a client. So for me, that meant economy of means, economy of resources, economy of construction. All these are what a client seeks in a design. And architects who can match this, who are aware of this, can, I think, really succeed. I thought I'd give you an example where on our website is a small case study for a footbridge in a very remote part of the coast down in Cornwall and in the UK. But it's a very important historic site. It's packed with archaeology, and it's the castle of the King Arthur and his round table. So it's a kind of mythological, but also there's a long legacy on the site dating for about 1,000 years. The footbridge was to connect two parts of the castle. It's sort of part of a wider master plan. But we realized that it wasn't enough just to have a design of a bridge. The construction of the bridge would be very demanding. There was almost no access by road, and the seas around there are very wild. But we decided to add this to the competition brief, the logistics of construction and the methodology that one would use, both to show that the project could be built, but also the temporary works associated with a bridge would not damage the landscape. So, and then we got on the jury, engineers and construction advisors. So we widened the definition of the design competition to include this aspect of deliverability. It had a wonderful effect, I think, on the types of teams who were attracted to the competition and the skills that they brought with them. That I think brought a better result for the client and one that matched a lot of their other factors. So the second part of the question was, how do we impart this to new staff? Which is something which is, I think, many architects will recognize as well. How do you impart that culture and these these insights that you have. I'm really privileged to have 3 senior architects in the team. They manage the day-to-day process of the projects. And coincidentally, all 3 of them have had client-side experience in their careers. So they're helpful in a way in helping to set the standards and help train the team. We like to get all our team to meet the client and get involved in the meetings and the workshops so that they can see the relationships that develop between client and ourselves and architects. And I think that's a very powerful thing, actually, just giving access people to these fairly high level communications.
So, how do you, in that process, and after bringing people into the fold, how do you maintain the balance of advocating for the client and the best outcome without taking over the design?
Okay, I would own up to sometimes wanting to pick up a pencil again or a marker or whatever it is. But we're fortunate enough to work with some very talented architects around the world. And it's one
Okay.
aspect we are absolutely clear about. We're not designers. And I think that is for us, it's an important principle. But instead, we provide the client with strategic insights. We've worked on so many projects. We're over 200 competitions now in the lifetime of the firm. So we've seen a lot of issues and we've come across a lot in our careers. And therefore, we can help channel this learning back into the process. So helping the client to recognize the hidden value in concepts presented, but also helping them develop as an organization so that they're matching the skills and competencies of the architects. So to summarize, I think I'd describe us as enablers. We can identify opportunities that others might miss, but we're clear that we are not there as the managing the design process or even the level of assessment. We help during the assessment, but as far as possible, we've tried to stay objective and give everybody their approach. And I think there's another example which might be interesting to you, which we worked for Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C. a few years back on a master plan and a gateway building. And Gallaudet, many of your listeners may know, they're the only bilingual liberal arts university where programs for the deaf and hard of hearing are conducted in sign language. So it's a very different environment to a normal higher educational institution. And we recognize that the competition could be a mechanism to help bring their communities together as well as answer these practical master planning issues. And we devised with the campus architect, who was excellent, we devised a process called Shape Gallaudet. And this invited students and stakeholders to leave ideas that the incoming design teams might like to consider. And these were provided then to the 4 shortlisted teams. And we also made sure that there were students who were buddied with each team. So when the teams visited, they had somebody to take them around. And I think they found that the insights that they got from that very meaningful experience of walking around space with somebody who was hard of hearing was really helpful in enabling and enlarging what they could do in design.
Yeah. So you touched on this a bit, but what roles do competitions play in your consultancy?
A lot, but not all. We do promote other selection processes, so everything from kind of one-on-one talent spotting all the way through to competitions tend to be the most obvious. They're usually public, so they're on the website, and we're very well known for competitions. But we do realize and also support the fact that there are different types of processes depending on what your client needs. But it's also a good time to highlight the essential work that the others in the office do, which is writing and communication. So my wife and partner, Catherine, is a writer, and we place a strong emphasis on writing and telling a story. This helps to shape the client's vision and attract the right firms to apply. So her team takes a project scope, often including the sort of narrative of the site, the context, the social and cultural context, the wider initiatives, and the genus loci. And they shape that together into something which helps the client communicate their vision and the messages that they want to impart to the design teams before they come in. And I think that is probably the biggest difference that was made in running the architectural competitions, this realization that once one began adding the story and the narrative, you got a very much deeper understanding from the teams.
Makes a lot of sense and has a relationship back to probably educational practices as
Yes.
well. So makes sense. What do you think is the most misunderstood part of the of design
Yeah.
competitions?
Okay. That's a good question. But perhaps before I answer directly, it's worth raising a related point. I have no numbers for this, but this is intuition. 99.9% of all procurement for design services, anywhere you are in the world, I think, is usually undertaken through some sort of closed framework or a tender process, often which does not include design as one of its components. And this has all sorts of issues such as lowest price selection, lack of engagement between client and the architect. And bizarrely, I've no understanding why this remains um, a method of choice for the majority of clients and architects, despite well documented failures. So, coming back to your question, competitions allow talent to shine through. They let the client meet potential architects during the process at the beginning of a relationship. And certainly in our competitions, we always insist that the lead design principles are locked into the process, not just the competition, but also should they win, then into the contracting. And the roles of all collaborators should be well defined so that the client understands what they're getting, but equally
Yeah.
the design team gets an insight into client practices and how they're organized. So the most misunderstood part, I would say, from the kind of feedback that we get, is that architects fear their ideas will be stolen and decisions will be made behind the scenes. I think both are untrue, and certainly not in our experience. Firstly, there's a competition fee or an honorarium which is paid to shortlisted firms. Now, it doesn't cover everything, and it's usually sort of at the level to help with expenses and presentation material. But I think there are other benefits for architects, which we may talk about in a moment. And we have very strict rules around IP to protect ideas. The assessment process is transparent. We publish that at the beginning of competitions. It says who's on the shortlisting panel and who's on the selection panel. So it's very clear who is making the decisions. And we offer feedback at every stage, particularly at the second stage, bringing together commentary from the selection panel so that it can go back out to the teams and they can get some insight into why they won or didn't win. And we learn as well, I think, through this process. Feedback from architects and clients has helped us restructure things like interim workshops and change the scope and requirement of deliverables. So I think it's a two-way street. And I hope we're able to raise standards and deliver what we offer.
Makes sense. So you've mentioned that you've been through over 200 of these. How have you seen these competitions evolve?
Well, one disappointing aspect about competitions evolution has been the rise of what I'd call opportunistic competitions that A, charge for entry, they have usually no site, and the IP is vague or non-existent. And unfortunately, these play on students and young firms because it looks like they're going to get exposure and there's always a small prize. But it seems to me that's not good competition practice. And like anything in life, you need to be certain of the outcomes, that people have to be serious. And it's very frustrating that the architectural media often supports these competitions and illustrates them. And I think long term, it's not good for the profession. And those of your listeners who are familiar with the European method will know that they have a slightly different style in Europe where most competitions are open, anonymous. So there's a single stage. Each competitor will take the brief, make a design, usually just drawings, no other supporting information. And the competition is then judged by an independent panel who select one winner. And it's great if you're the one winner, but these can reach hundreds of submissions, and that's a lot of effort for those who don't succeed. It's a part of the culture in many countries. We worked in Finland for a while, and competitions are a very established way of younger practices getting work. And they even have competitions which are specifically for younger practices. So I think there are some advantages to open competitions. It's not that they are necessarily bad, but in terms of a real focus for a client with a complex project, I think the two-stage process is really an effective way. So the first stage, your expressions of interest, a shortlist is put together, and the shortlist then focuses on a concept design. That, in our experience, that's been the best way to get responses and to get projects which are built. I think the other two changes are that when we were running competitions, say 10 or 15 years ago, it would be very much an architect only, maybe with another collaborator, but unusual. That's completely changed now. And we find we're doing searches for integrated teams. So architect-led, but with engineering and sustainability and all of these aspects. I think that's a reflection of how complex the world is becoming and construction is becoming. And I think it's a good thing. It's made competitions more realistic in terms of developing concepts. And it's brought many more collaborators, I think, into projects, which they probably wouldn't have had the opportunity previously.
I would think too, with the two-stage process that you outlined, there would be visibility that wouldn't be present in the one-stage process for more than because your work gets seen at some level.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good point then, because I think the advantage of entering competition is exposure. That's the biggest advantage. So if you win, great, but if you don't win, the shortlisted get exhibited, they get press mentions. It is a very effective way of beginning to build your identity in the profession. And we ran a competition in Helsinki for the Guggenheim. It was unsuccessful, but the winner was a young team from France and Japan, Moro Kustaneki. And they went on to win a competition that we had in Australia for the Powerhouse, Parramatta, which is a major museum. And now it's wonderful to see they've been selected for the restoration of the Centre Pompidou in Paris. That's a really nice trajectory, and competitions have really been very much a part of that and their approach to competitions.
So what advice would you have for a firm or a group considering participating in a competition?
Okay, perhaps it's sort of counterintuitive, but don't enter every competition. Be selective. I think it's important to sit down when a competition is announced and be pretty frank about whether you've got the skills and expertise and appetite for this. I would say also build a team specifically for the competition so you can kind of keep a control on cost and resources. I think that's a very important aspect so things don't get run away. The benefits are kind of, you can help younger members of the office gain real experience, real-time experience. And I think it helps you build your network of other collaborators. And particularly if it's an international competition, a lot of our competitions feature international with local firms. In the case of the project in Australia, it was that there was a kind of joint authorship, design authorship. And then for other projects, it extends to architects of record and these sorts of things. But I think it's a great opportunity to widen your network. Architects are, by definition, curious. And we certainly, for Dallas, for instance, we had a lot of interest, both in the US and internationally.
So what is the most impactful thing that has helped you grow your consultancy?
That's an easy one. That persuading my wife to join me in the consultancy. I think she brought something that was missing, and her ability to sort of capture the narrative of a project, I think, has really helped in both raising the profile for client organizations, but also identifying the right sort of architect to target. So we try to target younger and emerging firms. There's often a place for those in the competitions we run, but also the larger firms, and which would be most appropriate for this particular type of project. I think the narrative and the story that we tell is important in emphasizing that.
Well, I really want to thank you again for taking time out of your schedule to share your insights with me and with our listeners. Until next time, this has been Aspect.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for asking, Brian.